Welcome to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast this week. I'm delighted to have Jo Lakin with us, and Jo and I have worked with each other for a number of years, but recently gone through our mediation course. So the title of what we're looking at today is The Power of Early Dialogue, and I've just asked Jo to come along to share her thoughts around mediation and why she did the training, etc. But Jo's speciality is employee relations, so employee relations from that point of view. So Jo, welcome on board.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and I know you're busy and just got into a new venture, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come on board today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what we do is with everybody, people know so far, we send out to our guests 7 questions in advance so they can get that kind of rich information to share with us, and we set them up to succeed. So Jo, would you mind telling everybody kind of a plotted career history, how you've got to where you are today? That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always worked in HR. I've been in HR for sort of 28 years now, which is a bit scary, isn't it? And I've had a couple of generalist roles along the way, but predominantly employee relations. That's been my specialism from fairly early on in my career, to be honest. Always worked in the corporate world, various sort of blue chip organisations, manufacturing, retail, hospitality. I did a very small stint in consulting back in 2021, just a few months. And since then, I dipped my toe into the water and thought, this is something I really want to do. Then took on a long-term contract with Born Leisure. And as you know, I left there at the end of December and have finally taken the leap into the world of consulting. So I've set up my own company, JL People Resolutions, focusing on employee relations services. So it's a brand new year, new start for me, something completely different.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, and I know we've been talking, etc. But I thought you were going to put your feet up, start of the year, enjoy it, etc. But you're already really busy already, aren't you? In demand.
Absolutely, my plan didn't work. Yeah, I know. I remember speaking to you at the back end of last year. I was like, right, I'm going to have a bit of time off. I really think I deserve a rest. And it hasn't panned out that way, but I'm not complaining. I have got a couple of clients that I've taken on already, and they're keeping me busy. So it's been great. It's been a really good start, better than I'd anticipated.
Yeah, I'm really chuffed, and it's nice to be in demand and feel good and also do the work that you want to do. And I know we chatted before about consultancy and where to go. So no, I'm really chuffed and delighted from that point of view. So if we go through to the questions later, I was lucky enough to work with you going through mediation and kind of train you as a mediator from that point of view. So I just wanted to share with people today about kind of why did you choose to be trained as a mediator? What kind of made you go into kind of getting trained in that way?
Well, I think if you think about the HR role, whether you're in an employee relations or you're in a generalist HR role, a huge amount of the role is about supporting team members or team members and their leaders to deal with conflict situations. And most of the time that results in grievances, if I'm really honest with you, and that, you know, they're very timely processes. They can be very emotionally draining for everybody involved. And I always knew there was a better way of dealing with things, to be honest. And over the years, I've dealt with a number of external mediators in various companies, and talking to them, I knew that it was a skill that I could develop myself, and it was something that I wanted to do. So obviously you and I met, and you talked to me about the course, and I knew that it was definitely the way forward for me.
Yeah, and I really love the way about a skill for yourself, because it is a skill.
Absolutely,
a new skill set, definitely to help in that kind of HR arena, because we know that going down that grievance route, 9 times out of 10 people don't get what they want. And I really love that bit about the harm. It's not just for those people involved, it's everybody else involved. There's all that harm and destruction, isn't it?
It's not a nice process for anybody, and often, unfortunately, by the time it's got to a formal grievance stage, things are so bad that people they've almost checked out of the organisation. So it's, you know, in my mind, the earlier you deal with things, the better for everybody involved.
Yeah, and it's also, by the time it gets to that kind of grievance stage, people have gathered allies, other reasons to defend their approach, and it could be nothing to do with the real root cause. They've just built it up to defend their approach against the other person. So it just gets completely out of hand, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, it does. And it becomes a very them and us situation, doesn't it? And then how do you rebuild that relationship? So if you're reporting to a leader that you've raised a grievance about, how do you if it has got to that real angry stage and you've got allies and witnesses and all that kind of thing, it becomes very difficult to repair, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also the bit even after the event, if there's a grievance, etc., people are hypersensitive, hypervigilant, so they're always looking out of going, aha, I knew they were like this, and you're going,
absolutely.
Probably that's where it even more heightens that experience, and then others have reported again, and it just doesn't repair, does it?
No, people are looking for things all the time, aren't they? Once they've got in their mind that they're not being treated in the right way, they're almost looking for things to go wrong, and it's almost like adding it to their list, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what we don't want, do we? We want to get that list rid of, and actually to sort out the issues from that point of view. And what did you like about the course, or what did you find about the course from your perspective?
Well, I think I remember saying to you at the time, I was really nervous about doing the course. I thought, well, 4 days, it's going to be really intense, really long days. We were on Teams, weren't we? And that made me a bit nervous as well, thinking, how am I going to be able to cope with learning all day on Teams and working with somebody that I didn't know very well? But it was, as soon as we started the course, I mean, firstly, the time flew, and I felt very safe and able to be honest about what I was thinking and feeling throughout the course. And from a communication perspective, I thought you were really clear throughout, and we got loads of opportunity to practice what you were saying. The thought of role play was not my thing at all. I thought, oh no, don't do role play, don't like that. But I think I got into it, don't you? I think my skills came into all, to be honest. So, but no, it was really interactive. We had a lot of fun, actually. 4 days of, I didn't think there'd be lots of laughs along the way, but there were. But I took so much from it in terms of skills that I now use on an everyday, not just when it's a formal mediation process, but literally on an everyday basis when I'm faced with different situations, whether it be personal or at work, to be honest.
And I really like that bit about their life skills that we teach. It's not just you turn them on, I must do it as a mediator and turn it on then. It's actually their life skills that we work through that helps you A, in your day job, but B, at home, outside work, etc., that kind of helps from a conflict resolution point of view, but just a conversation point of view as well, isn't it? So for that.
And I think it's made me a lot calmer as well when you are faced with a conflict situation, whereas I might have beforehand read very quickly. Certainly from a personal perspective, I have noticed that I'm able to stand back now and go, right, okay, I'm just going to calm down, and then I'm going to be able to deal with this more constructively.
Yeah, and it's great, isn't it? Because then you actually start to hear the words better. Whereas actually when that red mist comes over or you're triggered, you're in your own mindset then, rather than actually, let me just take a calmer breathe, let me really hear, then actually you can have a better conversation and then move forward. So yeah, that's great. Really good to hear. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what did you find that was really stretching for you in the course? What kind of moved your comfort zone? What did you find that really stretched you?
Well, I think it was, there was lots of hints and tips that I took from the course along the way, but I think it's what I really found interesting from my perspective. It's not my job to fix everything. And that was a really different way of thinking. And I think we discussed it a lot one day, didn't we, on the course, because it was a bit of a light bulb moment, which is a bit bizarre, really. But I think in the past, I've been very, as HR, people come to me and I'm, I almost fix their problems for them. Whereas this has really challenged my thinking about that and actually challenged the way I work. And I do work differently now in terms of how I can help people to facilitate and fix their own issues as opposed to doing it for them. And it's certainly made me view scenarios in a different way.
Because it's that part as well about stretching your thinking of people think I've got to go and rescue and I've got to go and save and I've got to go, that's what I've got to do as a mediator, whereas actually it's complete opposite of the skills and techniques we talk. We want people to stand on their own 2 feet, to come up with ideas, come to idea, because they're more likely to own it and move forward, whereas we all know that if someone else gives us an idea, we might try it half-hearted, but if it goes wrong, we'll blame that person that gave us the idea rather than us taking that full ownership. Yeah,
I think
really
it's
good.
about encouraging team, isn't it? To, I have conversations on a daily basis, whether it be with leaders or team members, where they, someone's said something or done something and not happy. But it's about facilitating their thinking then in terms of, okay, how do I address this to ensure that it doesn't blow into something bigger, because the earlier they can have that conversation with the person, the better.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I spoke to someone recently that through a mediation, and they're coming out with like demands, and I demand this and I demand that, and what was really good is getting them to think in how they would receive it if they were the other person, kind of walk in their shoes, etc. It was great for this colleague to go, yeah, I wouldn't like it if demands were sent to me, or that kind of position. So it's really lovely to get them to shift around, to kind of really listen to each other, and I think that's really important about walking in each other's shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. And also making them sometimes take a step back and think about, right, okay, what do you need to move forward? Because actually sometimes you get into that whole dialogue and not able to see the wood for the trees. But if you just get them to stop and think about, okay, how do I move forward from this? What do I need? And taking accountability for that as well.
And I just, you know what, I was just like a proud parent then when you said, what do I need? And I love that word of need rather than want.
Exactly.
Isn't it? So that's
well, we used it a lot, didn't we? That is absolutely instilled in here now, Stephen, and I use it all the time in my work now, because it's, again, it comes back to that point of it's not my job to fix it for you, but what can I help you with, and what do you need to move forward? And that doesn't mean me doing it for you.
Yeah, and it's really good about just getting people shifting that want and need words, because we know that a lot of colleagues go, what is it you want? And actually people go, I want that person sacked or disciplined, and you go, that's not on the table. And that person goes, well, you asked me the question, so then you become part of that conflict, which actually there's no need to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, spot on. So if I was to say to you, kind of what benefits would, so before you went into consultancy or that, so if I was to ask colleagues, what benefits would they have seen working with you?
Well, I think that if you'd asked some of my close team members, they'd have certainly seen a shift in me in terms of that, being more reflective, as I mentioned earlier, sort of taking a step back and you know, just giving everyone time to think and calming down before conflict arises, because even in teams you get disagreements and stuff, don't you? But for me, I think it's definitely being a more reflective, calmer, and but also feeling confident enough now to call out conflict at an early stage. You know, if something doesn't feel right, or you can see things going on between two people, it's perfectly okay to just say, is everything okay? Or if someone's having a moan to you about somebody, you can say, well, why don't you talk to them about it? Have you thought about going for a cuppa with them and just trying to address the issue? Because often they're really little things that could be ironed out very quickly. So I think I came out of the course feeling more confident to talk to colleagues about and leaders and people that I was working with about, you know, potential conflict situations and how they could potentially deal with it.
And it's great. I know we used the phrase about leaning into it. So if there is something, those smaller things before they get into destructive conflict and build, lean in and say, you don't see myself today, you know, should we have a chat, or kind of that kind of perspective, which is much nicer and caring and psychological safety, rather than I'll just ignore you, they're having a bad day. And actually that bad day becomes even worse and worse and builds with time. So I think that leaning in is just so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just prevents it getting out of hand, doesn't it, to be honest?
And what benefits would you say the colleagues that you've worked with, when you've kind of used your new techniques and your new skills, what difference have you seen in them going forward?
Well, honestly, I can think of so many examples where people have, my mindset changed so much after the course that I would have regular one-to-ones with team members, leaders, etc. And I definitely played it differently with them in terms of, you know, when I was hearing things and moans about other people, it was about challenging back in a constructive way. Okay, this is what I'm hearing. Have you spoken to them about it? And there was you know, one particular scenario I can remember where someone was really unhappy with their leader and certain things that were happening, and wanted to raise a grievance. And you know, we know, don't we, that grievances, you know, we talked about earlier, that they're not great for anybody to go through. And I knew this person would not cope very well with the grievance process. And I encouraged them to go and talk to their leader. They were really nervous. really nervous about having that conversation, because it's difficult, isn't it, to say to somebody, can I just talk to you about how you made me feel?
Yes.
And I coach them through what they could potentially say in that conversation to address the issue informally. And it worked. It absolutely worked. And they were, you know, she said it was the most difficult conversation ever. But on the back of it, the changes were huge in terms of ways of working going forward. But you know, I can honestly say there's been loads of examples of where that has happened since being attending the course and becoming a trained mediator. Even at home, Stephen, honestly, you know, not just at work, even at home, dealing with two teenagers, skills come into play every day, I can assure you.
Yeah, and it's I just love the part of also going back about talking to the colleague but coaching them, because I think that's the key, is as well to follow that through, about actually give them a script or work through phrases and a structure. Because we all know when they're in that, when colleagues are in that environment, their body's going to be filling up with cortisol, they're going to get anxiety. You know, by actually giving them a structure and a script, they can at least hold on to something to go, if I follow this path, I'll be okay. And I think that's the bit which is key of mediation and facilitation. It's not just let's do it for a day, it's how do we give structure to people to have those meaningful conversations.
And that script is imperative for them to get through that meeting and be able to explain how they're feeling. They absolutely need notes, and that's what this person did. And it worked brilliantly.
And it's fantastic for that person. They must have felt like an elation afterwards to go, it probably wasn't as bad as I thought.
Completely. You know, they were both came out of the situation feeling a lot more positive about things going forward. And you know, there was no need for a grievance to be raised. It absolutely needed a conversation about, you know, it's misunderstandings, miscommunication, things that happen on a daily basis in work life, where people are firing off emails and they don't understand the impact of some of the words. Emailing people at certain times where you know that person was not available and they thought they knew that they weren't available, and all these things just build and build and build, don't they, until people feel that they can't take it anymore.
And it's the bit of also about people have their own map or version of the world. So that's only what we see. That's the kind of bit that colleague or that's kind of feeling. And we've all been there, about we have our map of the world and our version of the world. But until we actually can talk about it, and unfortunately human beings fill gaps. So if they don't hear something back or something's not right, we fill it with a gap of our map of the world to suit us.
We do, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to encourage that dialogue between those two people, because it's about, isn't it, how would you feel? And that's to what we were talking about earlier. It's exactly that.
And and I think the key to it is, with mediation, it's not a defend and attack approach. It's about actually getting down to that lower level, about how people are feeling, what's really going on in the world, what's the real impact of those, rather than actually when people go into a grievance or a hearing, they just stay at that high level surface. They don't really get down to what's really going on in that person, which mediation does, doesn't it? Really goes below the level.
It does, and often what's come out, and we both know, don't we, that there's a lot of things that go on in people's personal lives, for example, that perhaps other people aren't aware of, and that could impact how they behaved on that particular occasion. But I think just by that mediation process and being in that safe environment where they can talk about it, you see a whole different perspective, don't you, coming out.
And if you would say, going forward now to the future with your new company and your consultancy, which I know you're doing really, really well with already, what would you say the key skills that you've taken forward now to help you going forward in your kind of consultancy role? So what are key skills you've taken forward?
So I think it is the you know, helping leaders and even helping HR teams see that nipping things in the bud, dealing with conflicts at a much earlier stage is far more beneficial than letting it get to a grievance stage. So, you know, often, you know, most of the grievances that come my way, even now as a consultant, I look at them and just think, this is just a conversation could have been had, and we could have completely kind of, you know, didn't need this process at all. So I think it's about the spotting things early, coaching leaders, coaching HR teams, and also it's that them understanding the benefits then of dealing with things at an early stage.
You've
got a happy team, then you've got a more engaged team, haven't you? You've got less stress issues, you've got less well-being issues. It's a win-win situation, isn't it, at the end of the day?
And I think I love that bit about win-win, isn't it? That we do want from a person's mental health, well-being, engagement, but also from a company point of view of reducing costs, reducing sickness, productivity, all those things that go with it. It is a win-win, and that's the bit where
it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Absolute no-brainer.
And that's where I get on my kind of pedestal to go, come on, organisations, it's a win-win. Let's stop going down those draconian routes of grievance, etc. Even someone else recently I saw, and they said, we told a colleague that they could do a grievance, or we might be able to help them in a softer approach. Well, they kind of pushed the grievance first, rather than actually we could go down an easier route and really kind of let's try that first. So it's a win-win. So I'm just going to nick that, Jo, and keep shouting that from now onwards. Jo said win-win, but I'll put my name on it.
It is definitely a win-win situation, isn't it?
So going forward for this year, people always ask, and I'm being nosy, what other self-development or are you working on for 2024? What's the key goals for Jo?
So, well, as I said at the beginning, new year, new start. This is all very new to me. I'm setting up my business. This is the first time for me being self-employed. So I am learning huge amounts and pushing myself out of my comfort zone a huge amount as well. So, I spoke to you last week about networking, about how I've got all these networking events in the diary. It's not something that I'm entirely comfortable with, but I have joined a couple of groups that I'm hoping that I'll be able to fit into and get lots out of. So that's an area of development for me, to be honest, completely, because I've never really done a lot of that. I'm learning about finance, I'm learning about marketing, so different skills completely to the just the world of HR.
And how are you finding learning those new skills?
It's a steep learning curve, put it that way. So I have enlisted the support of a great accountant who is holding my hand through the first year, because it is when you've not done it before, it's there's a huge amount to learn, isn't there, when you're setting up a business.
And it's also the bit about people to go to, but a good accountant, those kind of things. And I love the bit about marketing, kind of those things, which your comfort zone of just grow and grow. And I know when I first went freelance and then like my own company, it was a massive steep learning curve, but I loved it. And it gave me a real buzz. And every time I learned something new, I was like, and this is a good new skill that I've got and done. Nobody else has done it.
Absolutely. It's great. And it's meeting lots of new people. I've already met so many new people through just 4 weeks of setting up my own business. The amount of people that have come forward who said, I'm a consultant and I live not far from you if you'd like to meet for a cuppa. So there's some great people out there who are really willing to share. So it's been a real eye-opener, but a very positive experience so far. But no, lots to learn in terms of growing my business for the year. And like I said, I'm lucky enough to have a couple of clients already, but it's about having a strategy now to grow my business for the remainder of this year and not just rely on a handful of clients. So that is my priority.
And I think the bit there of really kind of the way you're working, thinking broader, how do I get more clients rather than just rely on a couple, absolutely fantastic. And I know you'll be a huge success. I definitely know you will be. So how can people reach out to you, connect with you from that point of view, Jo? How can, to like a specialism or that kind of stuff, how can people reach out to you?
So as I said, employee relations is my specialism, and the best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn, to be honest. So my profile there is up to date and people can message me on there, connect with me in terms of the services that I offer.
Fantastic. And I just want to say Jo is wonderful to work with from that perspective, really professional, someone you need actually from that employee relation kind of role that you kind of need to move forward and have that, because it's always that serious part when it gets to yourself. So actually just want to recommend Jo from that perspective. So Jo, can I just say a huge thank you for today? Really appreciate it, giving up your time and coming on our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. But can I just say enjoy your weekend coming up, get some R&R time, time. But I just wish you all the very best for your company, and I know we'll stay in touch as well, so I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you, Stephen, for all your support along the way as well. Your advice has been brilliant, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's just going to make me blush before we leave, so I'll have to put a filter on afterwards.
I'll pay you later.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Jo. I really, really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see all your successes.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers, Jo.